might think pirates spent most of their time swinging from ropes, yelling "air," and hunting buried treasure, but their biggest enemy wasn't the Royal Navy or rival buccaneers. Nope, it was actually something a lot more boring and challenging: catching fresh fish while their ships were racing through the ocean at full tilt. Let me tell you something wild about this. Pirates had to eat right, but fresh seafood was pretty much their version of gold, high in protein and better than the usual stale biscuits and salty pork. And trust me, the solutions they came up with for hooking dinner while sailing at top speed were as clever as they were bonkers. So here's the deal. Pirate ships didn't exactly have the luxury of dropping anchor whenever they wanted to fish. They were constantly on the move, sometimes sailing at speeds up to 8 knots, about 9 miles per hour. Now, imagine trying to catch a slippery fish when your entire wooden vessel is bouncing on waves, sails flapping, and you're dodging cannonballs or the occasional angry seabird. The problem was simple. How do you snag dinner without slowing the ship down or losing half the crew to either sharks or boredom? Let's start with the obvious first attempt: a hand line tossed overboard. Problem set up. The pirates tried fishing with handheld lines, simple fishing poles, and nets thrown into the water. The catch? It was pretty pathetic. The ship might be slicing through the water faster than a sea turtle on a lazy Sunday, and the line would drag behind, teasing fish 1 minute, then snapping or tangling the next. Plus, the waves caused constant jerking, so either the bait was ripped off or the lure just swayed like drunk sailors on shore leave. Spoiler alert. This method was about 75% ineffective and 43% frustrating, with the other percentages left over from curses and losing fingers to fishing hooks. You can probably guess how that ended. Pirates often ended up with nothing but seaweed and crab claws caught on their lines. Bad idea, really bad idea, but they had to eat, so they experimented. One classic failure story involves Captain Henry Morgan's ship in the late 1650s in the Caribbean. Legend has it they tried dragging a giant net behind the ship, hoping to catch a bounty of fish while sailing to Port Royal. Here's what happened. The net snagged on underwater rocks, tore to shreds, and the whole mess tangled up the rudder so badly the ship went in circles for hours. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation. Morgan reportedly had to disguise his ship as a fishing vessel to sneak past enemies while repairs were being done. Not exactly the high seas swagger one imagines, right? Here's where it gets interesting. The real genius was something pirates stumbled on, probably while half-drunk and swearing at the waves: trolling. No, not the kind that harasses people online, but dragging baited lines behind a moving ship. Turns out this technique worked surprisingly well. Pirates rigged weights and floating buoys, called Dutchmen back then, to keep their lines stable and avoid tangles. They'd use multiple hooks strung along a single line spooled out from a wooden barrel, sometimes extending as far as 30 to 40 feet behind the ship. This setup increased chances of snagging larger fish, like mackerel or even the occasional tuna, without slowing down the vessel or risking their necks over the rail. Pirates didn't realize it at the time, but trolling works because the movement through the water mimics swimming prey, triggering a fish's chase instinct. The saltwater flow also helps keep bait fresh and attracts more curious sea creatures. It's basically their version of a motorized fishing lure, pretty high-tech for the 17th century. A fun story here. Blackbeard, the infamous Edward Teach, was known for using trolling lines extensively while patrolling the waters near the Bahamas around 1705. His crew claimed they regularly caught enough fish without leaving full sail, enough to keep 50 men fed for entire weeks at sea. One night, the fishermen accidentally hauled up a surprisingly large Atlantic tarpon, so big it nearly capsized the small boat as they tried to bring it aboard. Turns out their trolling lines had attracted both fish and nearby curious sharks, leading to an impromptu, very wet sword fight between man and beast. I guess even pirates had unexpected wildlife encounters while just trying to get dinner. But here's the kicker. Even the best trolling setups sometimes failed, especially in rough weather. Enter the next brilliant idea: fish traps. Pirates adapted traps called fyke nets, which were sort of basket-like contraptions designed to catch fish that swim into them but can't get out. Now you might think, how do you use a stationary trap while sailing? They weren't. Pirates deployed these traps in calmer waters to supplement their catch, basically setting bases at hidden coves where crew could fish while anchored. Not exactly full-speed fishing, but this allowed faster voyages without sacrificing fresh food. These traps could catch dozens of fish per night and were surprisingly effective, up to 65% success rate in well-placed locations. Here's the problem, though. Leaving the traps unattended for too long resulted in tragic losses. Fish would rot inside, attracting crabs and sea urchins that turned the whole thing into a festering mess. One famous anecdote involves the pirate John Calico Jack, Rackham near Jamaica in 1692. His crew set out fyke nets near a reef, but due to a sudden storm, they couldn't retrieve them for over 2 days. When they finally returned, they found the catch turned into a slimy pile of smelly junk that caused a mutiny threat. The smell was so foul, it nearly forced the crew into abandoning ship. Pretty gross for a bunch of hardened swashbucklers, right? Thankfully, pirates also figured out how to preserve whatever they caught to avoid these disasters. Salt-curing fish wasn't just for pork anymore. They'd gut and clean their catch immediately, then pack them in barrels with plenty of salt. Talk about stabbing fish and burying them in sodium. By soaking the fish in brine with roughly 3.5% salt content, they prevented bacterial growth for weeks, sometimes months. This dry preservation allowed them to stockpile protein without refrigeration, basically their version of a medieval tuna can. The downside: when it came time to eat, the salted fish was rock hard and tasted like a mouthful of the ocean itself. Talk about ruining your fearsome reputation as a gourmet. Despite the rough methods, salted fish was better than horseradish, which was less a condiment and more a weapon to clear lungs after a day at sea. Legend says Captain Bartholomew Roberts demanded fresh fish, so often that his cooks developed secret recipes frying the salted fish to near-edible status, sometimes disguising the saltiness with tricking sauces made from lime juice and wild herbs. A little cooking magic went a long way in keeping the crew happy, because nobody wants a mutiny over bad food when you're surrounded by endless salty sea. But catching fish while sailing wasn't just about survival. It was a morale booster and a matter of pride. Pirate crews who could bring fresh food on board were seen as lucky or blessed by the sea gods. It created bonds and rituals. Sharing the catch was a way to ensure loyalty and stave off cabin fever. And here's a little surprise for you. Pirates sometimes fished for more than just food. They exploited their floating fish-catching gear to haul in floating debris and driftwood, which they used to repair their ships and stoke cooking fires. Multitasking like a boss, right? Now, not everything about pirate fishing was savory. Sometimes the desperation led to gross-out scenarios because hygiene standards were, let's just say, medieval. We're talking fish guts and slime coating the decks, tangled lines dripping with seaweed and worse, not to mention the occasional rat sneaking off buffet duty. Pretty unsanitary for a bunch who fancied themselves ocean royalty. But pirates had their own approach to dealing with the mess. It usually involved dumping unwanted remains overboard so fast it'd make you dizzy watching, which in turn attracted more hungry fish. It was nature's garbage disposal cycle, pirate style. Efficiency with a side of stench. So how did all these methods come together? Pirates combined their trolling lines, occasional net casts, fish traps at anchor points, and salt preservation into a flexible, if smelly, system that kept them alive and kicking on long voyages. This jury-rigged fishing economy allowed crews numbering as many as 100 men to survive months at sea without fresh provisions, a feat of maritime ingenuity considering the lack of modern refrigeration or advanced gear. By the 18th century, many pirate crews were as knowledgeable about fish behavior and ocean currents as they were about gunpowder and sailing tactics. That's some serious multitasking. To wrap things up, the next time someone imagines pirates just lazily plundering and guzzling rum, remember they were also part-time fishermen, inventive survivors who managed to pull dinner out of the ocean's chaos while dodging cannonballs and storms. It's basically like trying to barbecue on a roller coaster. Not easy, definitely messy, but somehow they made it work. And isn't it ironic that the legendary high seas marauders were also early pioneers of trolling lures and fish traps? Yeah, pirates, the original hipsters of sustainable, if slightly absurd, fishing techniques. So there you have it, how pirates caught fish sailing at full speed. Not the swashbuckling tale you expected, right? But hey, keeping a ship fed is important, even if you're the scariest pirate on the seven seas. Next time you enjoy a nice grilled fish dinner, raise a glass or a cutlass to those resourceful buccaneers who figured out how to feed themselves while the world was still figuring out how to tie a good fishing knot. Air and bon appetit.